The white cop stopped a black man on the street not knowing he was the dean of the police academy he graduated from. That's what Officer Blake said to the black man wearing a tailored suit, standing calmly outside a bakery at 7:45 a.m. on a Tuesday. The man didn't flinch. He had heard those words more times than he could count, just never from one of his former students. Dr. Harold Emerson didn't look like trouble. He looked like wisdom wrapped in patience, polished with years of experience and quiet power. But on that Tuesday morning in downtown Raleigh, North Carolina, none of that mattered. To the young officer approaching him with his hand already resting on his holster, all he saw was a black man standing alone with a phone in one hand and a pastry box in the other. "Sir, I need to see some ID," the officer said, stepping forward. Harold blinked slowly. He could have said 1,000 things in that moment. He could have quoted the Fourth Amendment. He could have asked for probable cause. He could have asked for a badge number. But instead, he quietly reached into his inside jacket pocket and handed the officer his wallet. Blake flipped it open and read the name out loud, Dr. Harold Emerson. "Huh. What kind of doctor are you?" Harold looked him in the eyes, voice even. "Criminal justice. I'm the dean at North Carolina Police Training Academy." Blake paused. Then blinked. That can't be." Harold didn't smile. "You graduated from my program 3 years ago. Second row. Right next to Cadet Ramirez." For a second, the street was silent. Even the birds in the tree seemed to pause. Harold had taught hundreds of cadets over his decades at the academy. He believed in what he taught: ethics, accountability, community-first policing. He remembered Blake, vaguely. A tall, energetic young man with a record clean enough for graduation but a gaze that sometimes lingered too long on power. Harold had kept an eye on him, had raised a few concerns to the instructors' committee, but nothing ever stuck. Blake passed the exams. He wore the badge. And now here he was, weapon ready on a quiet sidewalk, not recognizing the man who had once signed off on his future. I didn't recognize you, sir," Blake stammered. "That's usually the case," Harold replied. "Respect tends to disappear when uniforms are on and assumptions are made." Blake stepped back, shifting his weight uneasily. "We had a call about a suspicious individual loitering. Tall, dark-skinned, wearing a gray suit. You matched." Harold raised an eyebrow. "Loitering? I've been standing here less than 4 minutes. Waiting for a ride. Still, we're required to check it out." "Required by whom? The law? Or your biases?" That question, posed so calmly, so devastatingly precise, hung in the air like smoke. Blake didn't answer. He couldn't. Because deep down, he knew. He had approached Harold not out of procedure, but pattern. The same pattern Harold had spent his entire career trying to break. Later that day, Harold sat in his office, high above the city, surrounded by shelves of law books and framed photos of graduates who had gone on to serve honorably. He sipped tea and stared out the window, replaying the encounter. He wasn't angry. He was exhausted. Exhausted that even after years of education and reform, the system still failed to see character before color. But something else bothered him. Blake's face. The way he had stuttered. The slight tremble in his voice after learning who Harold was. It wasn't fear of reprimand. It was something deeper. Something Harold had seen before: guilt wrestling with conditioning. He opened his computer and pulled up Blake's academy file. The notes were minimal. High marks in tactical response. Average scores in ethics. Counseling recommended after peer altercation, no follow-up documented. That last line stuck out like a sore thumb. Harold frowned. He hadn't seen that note before. He picked up the phone and called the Internal Review Office. "I'd like a full personnel review of Officer Tyler Blake. Training record. Complaints. Disciplinary actions. Everything. 3 days later, the file arrived. It was thicker than Harold expected. Blake had been involved in 6 field stops over the last 6 months where the individuals detained were later found to have committed no crime. All 6 were black men between the ages of 20 and 60. In 3 of those cases, body cam footage showed questionable escalation. In 2, the suspects had filed complaints. All were dismissed. Harold leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. It was textbook. Not the law textbook but the unspoken one. The one that let certain officers operate on the edge of suspicion, cushioned by ambiguity and protected by silence. And now that silence had bumped into the wrong man. He met with the Academy's director of training the next day. "We failed him," Harold said bluntly. "And we failed the city. Blake should have never passed ethics without counseling." Director Thompson frowned. It was a different time then. And his scores technically cleared the bar. "And now he's policing in the same city we swore to protect with integrity," Harold replied. "What does that say about our bar?" Thompson hesitated. "What do you want to do?" Harold looked him squarely in the eyes. "I want him back in training. Mandatory recertification. I'll handle it myself." And so, the invitation no, the order was sent. Officer Blake was summoned to a week-long remedial ethics and accountability training at the very academy where he once graduated. Led by none other than Dr. Harold Emerson himself. Blake didn't take it well. The first day of class, he walked in late. Sunglasses on indoors. Arms crossed. "You want me to sit through this because I made a mistake?" he challenged. "No," Harold said from the front of the lecture hall. "You're here because you didn't recognize a man you should have respected. Not for his title. For his humanity." For 5 days, Harold walked Blake and the other summoned officers through case studies, body cam footage, role-play scenarios. He showed them the difference between fear and prejudice. He read them names of black men who had died during routine stops. He told stories of mothers burying sons, of kids left without fathers. He made it real. But most of all, he made them listen. And by day 5, something in Blake cracked. He stayed after class. Alone. "Sir," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to treat you that way. I didn't know it was you." "That's the problem," Harold replied, voice soft. "You shouldn't have needed to know. I guess I thought I was doing what I was trained to do." "You were trained to protect and serve," Harold said. "Not profile and intimidate." Blake looked down at the floor. "I keep seeing your face that day. I keep thinking how close I came to pulling my weapon. I've pulled it before. I thought I was being cautious. But now I wonder if I've just been afraid of the wrong people all along." Harold didn't answer right away. He let the silence sit. Let the weight of Blake's words land where they needed to. "You have a chance," he finally said, "to be the officer this city actually needs. But only if you start seeing what's in front of you, not what the world told you to fear." Blake nodded. It was the first honest gesture he'd made all week. It had been 2 weeks since the mandatory ethics course ended. Officer Blake had returned to duty, quieter, more deliberate. His partner, Officer Gina Morales, noticed the shift right away. "You good?" she asked one morning, sliding into the squad car beside him. "Yeah," he said. "Just thinking a lot lately." "About Dean Emerson?" He glanced at her. "You know about that?" "Everyone does. You pulled over the dean of your own academy. And then had to sit through a week of him basically unpacking your entire worldview in front of the class. It's legendary now." Blake sighed. "Doesn't feel legendary. Feels like I got handed a mirror and didn't like what I saw." Gina was quiet for a second, then nodded. "Good. That means it worked." Meanwhile, Dr. Harold Emerson had resumed his duties at the academy, but something in him had shifted too. The encounter with Blake wasn't just a one-off. It was a symptom. A crack in the foundation of a system he had spent decades helping to build. He called for a special board meeting with the academy's leadership and community liaisons. "We need a new approach to training," he said firmly. "Not just procedural justice, but emotional intelligence. Implicit bias. De-escalation by empathy, not by force." One board member, an older retired captain, pushed back. "We can't make officers soft. They're facing real threats out there." Harold looked at him, calm but direct. "They're also becoming the threat when they see color instead of context. I won't retire leaving behind a pipeline that teaches fear instead of responsibility." The board voted. It passed. Barely. And so, a new pilot program launched, Community Immersion Week. Every rookie and any officer with excessive stop records had to spend 1 week embedded in a neighborhood they didn't come from, working alongside civilians, unarmed, under supervision. Guess who volunteered first? Officer Blake. He was assigned to the Glenmont district, a historically black neighborhood where mistrust of law enforcement ran deep. For 7 days, he worked at a community center run by Miss Alberta Jenkins, a former civil rights organizer turned youth mentor. Miss Jenkins didn't like cops. She made that clear on day 1. "You're not here to save anyone, officer," she said, handing him a broom. "You're here to listen and mop floors. Understand?" "Yes, ma'am." By the end of day 3, the kids at the center had warmed up to him. He fixed a broken basketball hoop. He helped with after-school tutoring. He started hearing names, not just noise. Stories, not just statistics. One boy, Jamal, 13, followed him around like a shadow. "You ever shoot anybody?" Jamal asked one afternoon. Blake paused. "No. But I've pointed my weapon. More times than I'm proud of." "Were they all black?" Blake swallowed. "Most." Jamal nodded. "My brother got pulled over last year. Hands on the wheel, doing everything right. Still got a gun pointed at his head. He can't sleep right no more." Blake couldn't say anything. What could he say? On the last day of his immersion, Blake stood up at the community center's closing circle. Parents, volunteers, and some skeptical older teens watched him. "I came here thinking I had nothing to learn," he said. "But I've realized I've spent years hearing noise and calling it danger. Seeing color and calling it threat. I'm sorry for every moment I let my badge blind me to someone's humanity." It wasn't a grand speech. But it was honest. Miss Jenkins looked at him and gave a single nod. "I've heard worse. Seen worse. Maybe you'll do better." Harold watched the live stream of that speech from his office. And for the first time in a long time, he felt hope. Then came the news that would test everything. One evening, Officer Blake and Morales responded to a robbery alarm at a downtown electronics store. As they arrived, a black teenager came running out the side entrance. Morales shouted, "Freeze," but Blake didn't move. He scanned the teen's face. Panic. Not aggression. The kid was terrified. "Let me try," Blake said, stepping forward, lowering his voice. "Hey," he said gently. "You okay?" The teen stopped, shaking. "I didn't take anything. I saw the alarm light go off and I got scared. I was just charging my phone in the back." "What's your name?" "Derek." Blake looked at the store manager, who'd just arrived. "You recognize him?" "Yeah, he comes in sometimes. Doesn't steal. We just got new sensors that read too sensitive." Blake nodded. He turned to Derek. "Go home. And next time, just wait for someone. You're not in trouble." Morales looked stunned. You just let him go? He didn't do anything, Blake replied. And he reminded me of someone. That night, he didn't sleep. He typed up the incident honestly. No spin. No justification. Just facts. 2 days later, Chief Daniels called Harold. I've got to be honest, the chief said. I thought this was a waste of time. This pilot program. But Blake? He handled a situation last night with so much control, compassion. It was textbook. Your textbook. Harold smiled, not out of pride, but relief. Then came the press conference. The department announced it would expand Community Immersion Week citywide. Blake was invited to speak. So was Harold. Standing side by side on the stage, the two men, once teacher and student, then cautionary tale and reflection, now stood as partners in reform. Blake stepped up to the microphone. I was trained in law, he said. But I wasn't trained in listening. Or in unlearning. Dean Emerson gave me a second chance. I intend to give that same grace to the people I serve. Because policing isn't about power. It's about presence. The applause was real. But more importantly, the change was too. 6 months had passed since the department had rolled out Community Immersion Week across all precincts. What began as a small initiative had now become a cornerstone of police training in the city, with officers required to spend time in the very communities they swore to protect. Complaints against officers dropped. Community trust rose, albeit slowly. But the change was tangible. Measurable. Lived. Officer Blake had become something he never expected to be: a bridge. He didn't pretend to be a savior, nor did he excuse his past. But he kept showing up. At every community center meeting. Every youth outreach event. He wasn't performing. He was learning, still. Quietly, persistently. And then, one morning, a letter arrived at his precinct. Handwritten. The envelope had no return address, but he recognized the careful script immediately. It was from Dr. Harold Emerson. Blake read the letter sitting alone in the locker room. Blake, I saw the way you talked to that boy outside the corner store last week. Not as an officer. As a man. As someone who has walked through the fire and decided not to let the fire define him. You've made mistakes. So have I. But you are trying. And that matters. More than you know. You asked me once what I saw when I looked at you. I didn't answer back then. I wanted to. I saw a scared young man hiding behind rules. Now, I see a leader. Walk in that truth. And keep walking. We still have miles to go. With respect, Harold. Blake folded the letter slowly. He didn't cry. But something loosened in his chest. Meanwhile, Harold had taken a sabbatical from the academy. Not retirement, not yet. But he needed time. Space to reflect. He traveled to Selma, Alabama, where his grandfather had marched in the civil rights movement. He sat on the bridge where blood had once been shed and watched young black teenagers walk across laughing, free, unafraid. He wept for them. For his students. For every name he had seen on protest signs and news headlines. For the lives that weren't spared a second chance. And for those that were. One spring afternoon, a new cohort of police cadets assembled in the auditorium of the academy for their first ethics session. The air buzzed with nervous anticipation. Rumors had spread that Dr. Emerson would be teaching again, just one lecture. A final gift before his full retirement. He walked in, wearing a simple gray suit, no tie. The room fell silent. He looked over the young faces, some black, some white, others brown, a few indigenous, some visibly queer, some silent but present in ways he recognized too well. I'm not here to teach you how to be police officers, he began. You'll learn that from procedures, drills, and fieldwork. I'm here to ask you who you'll be when no one's watching. When you're tired. When you're scared. When the world gives you a reason to choose fear over compassion. What will you do? A hand went up in the back. A young woman, Latina, firm in posture. What if we do everything right and the public still hates us? Harold nodded. Then you keep doing what's right. Because your job is not to be liked. It's to be worthy of trust. And trust is not owed. It's earned. Earn it. He closed with the same line he always did. Leave this academy better than you found it. And leave every person better than when you found them. Afterward, a group of cadets lingered to speak to him. One young man waited last nervous, clutching something in his hands. You don't know me, the cadet said, but I think you knew my cousin. Jamal. Harold's brow furrowed. Jamal. Glenmont? The cadet nodded. He told me about a cop who treated him like a human when he was 13. Changed his whole view. Jamal's in college now. I'm here because of what he told me about that week. Harold placed a hand on the cadet's shoulder. Then you're already a legacy. A month later, something remarkable happened. The city awarded Blake and Harold with the Civic Reconciliation Medal, a new honor created for individuals who contributed to healing institutional divides between public servants and marginalized communities. They stood together again, this time not on a training stage, not under protest signs, but in front of city officials, faith leaders, and young kids from the community center who now wore shirts that read, "We deserve more than fear." Harold's speech was brief but profound. Redemption is not a moment. It is a journey. And we walk it together, or not at all. Blake's voice trembled as he stepped up next. There was a time I thought I had all the answers. That rules were enough. That bias couldn't touch me because I didn't mean harm. I know better now. Intentions don't shield people from consequences. But change? Change begins the moment we let go of who we pretend to be and listen. After the ceremony, a journalist approached Harold. You've trained thousands of officers. Do you think real change is possible? Harold looked out at the small crowd of young officers talking to the community kids. Blake crouched beside Jamal, now 16, signing his cap. Yes, Harold said softly. Because I've seen it. A final scene, 1 week later. At the academy, a wall of portraits shows each dean who has served since its founding. For years, Harold's photo hung at the end, a silent testimony to his service. Next to it, a new photo was placed. Not of a new dean, but of a classroom. Blake and Harold standing at opposite ends of a circle of cadets. All seated equally. Listening. Learning. The plaque beneath it reads, "Every badge carries weight. Every heart carries choice." Harold retires quietly. No fanfare. He walks out of the building he helped shape one last time and sees a familiar figure waiting at the front steps. Blake. I heard this is your last day. Harold chuckles. You heard right. They stand for a moment in comfortable silence. Blake says, you saved my life, you know. Harold looks at him. No. You chose to live it better. That's all anyone can do. They shake hands. Firm. Honest. Without hierarchy. As Harold walks away, Blake turns and sees a group of rookie officers stepping out for their first community immersion shift. He smiles. Not because the work is done, but because it has finally, truly begun.